Skating games. Sadly, a now relatively dead genre of sports games that many grew up with. While I never got into them, I always liked the feeling of speed and pulling off all kinds of cool tricks that these games were all about. As a kid though, I just could never get my head around the controls, and by the time I could, the genre was basically dead and gone, and thus I no longer had much of an interest.
Even now, I'm not really sure how much I could get into games like Tony Hawk. Much like actual sports, I've never been into sports games. I'd much rather play more video gamey and arcadey versions of them like Mario Tennis. All I needed to find was a skating game that was more along the lines of the kind of games that I like to play. And that's when it was brought to modern consoles in 2012, I found exactly that in Jet Set Radio.
Jet Set Radio!
I instantly fell in love as soon as I booted the game up and saw the main menu. The cel-shaded graphics, the arcade-like gameplay, and the catchy as hell music allowed the game to become one of my favorite games of all time after only a few hours. To this day, I still consider it to be in my personal top 10 greatest games of all time. And I'm not the only one. The game has a huge cult following with an incredibly dedicated fan base. There's even a website called Jet Set Radio Live that acts as a real-world recreation of the actual Jet Set Radio. 10 stations, each with their own specific genre or gimmick. A TV channel where you can watch various kinds of videos. A wall where you can post images as graffiti. A chat where you can talk with other fans of the series and maybe even request a song from DJ Professor K. A literal recreation of the Seaman Dreamcast game. And a page where you can find tons of Jet Set Radio merchandise and fan projects. But despite all the love for the series, it never actually sold that well. While I couldn't find any concrete numbers, it has been made incredibly clear that SEGA has no interest in continuing the franchise. Even when there are attempts at a revival, it always came to a halt purely because of SEGA's lack of interest. Honestly, the series deserves better, and I'm here to tell you not only why it does, but also why anyone who hasn't played the game before should.
Before I get into things, I just want to clarify something. This video is specifically on the original Jet Set Radio, not its sequel, Jet Set Radio Future, or the GBA version. The reason why is the original Jet Set Radio is the most widely available version, being on the 360, PS3, Vita, and PC. Honestly, I think out of any version, the one you're most likely to play is the PC version, and I would honestly say that's probably the best version. Heck, the PC version was given away for free on Steam a few years ago, so I'm sure there are many of you who already own the game and have just never touched it. I really hope this video will be able to convince you to finally give the game a shot. And so, after almost a year, I bring you the second episode of Selling You On. A series where I take a cult classic game or series that I love and bring it to light and explain to you why it deserves your attention. And this time, I will be attempting to sell you on the cult classic Dreamcast gem, Jet Set Radio.
In the first Selling You On, I went into depth on the creation of the game and how the series evolved into what it was. This time, however, I'll be leaving that out because I want to shorten the length of this video so I don't end up with another 35-minute plus sales pitch, but also because there's a pretty decent, I'll bet, compressed documentary included in the HD re-release of Jet Set Radio that goes into the history of the game. If you want to know more, you can look it up either online or watch it right in the game in all its pixelated glory. Instead, I'm going to go right into the story, of which there isn't much to talk about. In the city of Tokyo-to, also known as not Tokyo, the streets are divided into 3 sections and are owned by their respective gang. Shibuya-cho, home of the all-female gang the Love Shockers, Kogane-cho, infested by the kaiju-themed Poison Jam, and Benten-cho, ruled by the technologically focused Noise Tanks. You start as Beat, a skater who forms a new gang called the GGs with a girl named Gum and a guy named Tab. Together, you stage a graffiti-based turf war with rival gangs, recruit more people into the GGs, outskate the police, and uncover a secret plot by the mysterious Rokaku Corporation. All this narrated by the best narrator in any game ever, DJ Professor K.
And I'm your captain and DJ, Professor K! Jet Set Radio!
Now, if all of that sounds fairly simple, that's because it is. The story is nothing more than an excuse for the various objectives you'll complete throughout the game. Jet Set Radio is divided into missions you can take on in a fairly non-linear fashion. They're usually comprised of spray painting all the rival graffiti in the area, racing another skater to a point to be the first to graffiti a spot, and even spray painting rival gang members. If you couldn't tell, graffiti is just as, if not more important to Jet Set Radio than the skating is, but I'll be getting into that later. While the mission objectives do sound repetitive, know that the objectives are not the actual point of the game. Rather, the point of the game goes back to Sega's arcade roots. Each level has you learning the layout of the map and mastering the controls to a point where you can expertly perform tricks and rack up points in a timely manner, also you can get the coveted jet ranking at the end. Unlike other skating games of the time, the tricks you perform aren't always achieved by inputting certain commands at certain points. Rather, most tricks are performed automatically as you jump from rail to rail. Jet Set Radio doesn't aim to be a complex skating simulator. Instead, it uses the act of skating and doing tricks to make basic movement fun and rewarding as you glide around the map. However, while the controls may not be as complex as Tony Hawk, Jet Set Radio still requires a mastery of its controls and environmental layout if you want to unlock everything the game has to offer. Throughout the game, you'll be unlocking new characters to play as, each with their own unique stats. The first stat, Power, represents each character's health bar. In every level, there are enemies that will go to frankly absurd lengths to bring you down. If your character's power level is high enough though, it means they can take that many more hits before you get a game over. Technique determines the amount of points you get for pulling off tricks and combos. Typically, the higher the technique, the easier it is to control the character. However, a high technique is usually matched with lower power, making them somewhat of a glass cannon. The final stat, Graffiti, determines both the difficulty of spraying medium and big graffiti spots, as well as the amount of points you get for spraying it. The higher the stat, the harder it is to spray, and the more points you get. It also affects how many spray cans you can hold at one time. By the time you finish the main story, you'll have unlocked most of the roster. However, if you complete various requirements like completing every mission within a district with the highest rank, you can unlock the ability to play as that region's specific rival gang. The hardest character to unlock, however, I'll leave for you to figure out, as they're an absolute treat if you're able to get them. However, characters aren't the only unlockable. Throughout the game, you'll be collecting graffiti souls, which unlock new kinds of graffiti for you to use. They can be tricky to get, but seeing all the cool and different designs is totally worth it. You can also make your own custom graffiti in an incredibly clunky and dated graffiti maker. Or if you're playing on PC, there's a program you can use that just puts any image you want into the game. If you want to do it the easy way. If you haven't been focusing in on my voice this entire time, you likely have heard the absolute bangers I've been playing in the background that range from funk to rock to hip-hop. All of these songs and many more can be found in Jet Set Radio. Of all the things that has resonated with people and stuck with fans the most, it's the amazingly diverse and unforgettable soundtrack. And it's all thanks to the game's composer, Hideki Naganuma. While the soundtrack is made up of some licensed songs from pre-existing bands, Naganuma is still responsible for picking said songs, as well as creating the game's most iconic tracks. Tracks such as Sweet Soul Brother, Humming the Bassline, Let Mom Sleep, and my personal favorite, Rock It On, are all earworms I still catch myself humming from time to time. Now, I could just talk about the music and what makes it so great, but I think the best way for you to understand why this soundtrack is so fantastic is to just let you listen to the tracks themselves.
Show you how to improvise, reminiscent of the wild style 75, cause it's the brothers on the mic, occupying the drum. We're taking 4 MCs and make them sound like one.
I be the spark from the cannon, blaze the outstanding tug of war with the poor, rich, and scandalous. Road running bandit, race against advancement, style wins, cause storms when I perform.
Still close without a reason, still the same when I hold it inside. Without a reason, still real when I have it inside.
When it comes to Jet Set Radio, nothing stands out more than its style. Everything from its revolutionary cel-shaded graphics that make the game look like graffiti, to its soundtrack that makes up a large part of its identity. Influenced by late 90s Japanese street culture, it expertly captures everything the 90s were about. Anti-establishment themes, the unique forms of expression commonly associated with the time period, and the type of fun only the 90s could have, Jet Set Radio is the perfect time capsule for the era. The truly amazing thing about Jet Set Radio's style is the fact that basing it so heavily on the culture of the 90s should have dated the game a year into the new millennium. Yet instead, it remains timeless to this day. Usually a piece of art can date itself for a number of reasons, most commonly by the way the art is made. For example, if the culture of the time the work was made in is a major part of its identity, it is almost guaranteed to date it to some degree when that era dies off and is replaced with whatever comes next. Jet Set Radio, however, avoids this entirely by making the culture of the 90s its own. By immersing itself so heavily in the style, it ends up owning the very culture it aimed to replicate. Now that the context surrounding Jet Set Radio has changed, it has gone from a product of the time to a game with a style that can be enjoyed by anyone today. Jet Set Radio stands as proof that the 90s doesn't have to be a guaranteed way to date something. Instead, it can be used to create a fun and upbeat atmosphere that can make a game stand out in today's market. And you don't need to look any further than the immense success of Splatoon for proof. The style of Jet Set Radio is not simply just a product of the time. It is an integral part of what makes Jet Set Radio stand out in the history of video games. It's the kind of fun only the 90s could have. Of course, this isn't to say that Jet Set Radio is a perfect timeless game. While the feel is timeless, the game itself is filled with issues that would be ironed out in its sequel, Jet Set Radio Future, such as awkward mission design and janky controls. However, none of this has taken away from the love the game has garnered since its release. While the poor sales have led to SEGA ending multiple attempts at revivals, the game has earned its place within video game history and deserves a bigger spotlight than it's gotten. And for the first time in years, it actually seems like this might happen. Back in 2016, there was a survey done to see what SEGA brands people would like to see revived the most. It was actually the survey that led to SEGA releasing the Shenmue 1 and 2 collection, as well as creating a new entry in the Sakura Wars franchise. Shenmue came in at number 4, and Sakura Wars came in at number 1. Take a guess which franchise was number 2. It's also definitely worth noting that SEGA has stated in just the last few months that they are looking to capitalize on the revival of existing IPs. And what better place to decide what to revive than the survey results they've already used to dictate what series to bring back. Hey, so another thing I should mention is that while I was editing this video, SEGA announced the results of a new survey to see what games fans wanted to see get revived for Sega Ages, and Jet Set Radio ended up coming in at number 1. While it's not a series revival, it's just a re-release. The fact that Jet Set came in at number 1 says a lot, and it proves to Sega that people love this series.
If there's one last thing I want to leave you with before I end this video, it's this. With Jet Set Radio's style being such a major focus of the game, as well as being a major reason why it's become such a cult classic, it can be easy to assume that Jet Set Radio is style over substance. However, I would argue that Jet Set Radio's style is its substance. And it's a style that needs to be experienced by anyone with even the slightest interest. Anyway, this has been Jack's Back of Macca. I am Macca, and I'll see you guys next time for whatever I end up doing next. And don't worry, the next Selling You On won't be another year in development. I already know what the game is gonna be, and that was honestly the major hurdle with this. I just need to figure out what I wanted to sell people on. And now that I already know what it is, it's just a matter of playing through it again and getting the footage. Also, sorry I didn't get a video out in August, but life was hectic. And I'm not even completely sure if this video is going to be out in September because I am directly where Hurricane Florence is making landfall, and I am leaving tomorrow. I'm evacuating. This shit could be fucking destroyed by the time I get back in a week. Oh man, this is gonna be great. I hope I can make this video. Whatever. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like. If I sold you on Jet Set Radio, please let me know. That is my ultimate goal. I just want to convince people to give this game a shot. If you want to see more selling you ons, or you want to see me stream, or you want to see me do other kinds of editorials, subscribe, like the video, do whatever. I'll see you guys next time. This has been Jack's Back of Macca. I am Macca, and I'll see you guys next time for whatever the hell I do. At the very least, play the game because there's a cuck sign in it.